There are millions of podcasts being done all over the world that take on the personalities of their creator. Some bring in thousands of listeners each week. Some bring in large amounts of revenue, while others entertain millions and help sell products. If you're like many podcasters, you want to reach your maximum potential. But how? How do you make your podcast stand out from all the rest? Join Dr. Barrett Matthews as he talks to experts who are doing it on The Productive Podcaster. Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of The Productive Podcaster. I am Dr. Barrett Matthews. If this is your first time joining The Productive Podcaster, let me tell you what this show is about. Well, I coached people on productivity for a long time. And when I started podcasting, I realized that people weren't getting their podcast started. They weren't getting it going because they thought everything had to be perfect. Everything had to be a certain way. And I wanted to show people that you can be productive in podcasting doing it any way you want to. So what I did is I put together a podcast to bring people on here who do different podcasts and to show you there's all types of ways you can do your podcast. The thing is for you to just get started, get it going, and you can learn as you go. You can change it as you go, so forth and so on. So that's the Productive Podcaster. Now, what I want you to do, for those of you who are new and for those of you who've listened for a long time, what I want you to do right now is share to everybody. Let them know they need to be listening to the Productive Podcaster. Also, I want to make sure everyone out there is subscribing. Make sure that you're doing that. And also take advantage of our Patreon, man. We got some stuff on Patreon, some great things for you just for supporting the podcast here for you as well. So as we move on right now, I'd like to start off the show with something I like to call pros and cons.
Pros and cons.
Now, what is pros and cons, you ask? Pros and cons is where I give you some professional advice on starting a podcast so that you can be a productive podcaster. Now, we're going to talk about co-hosted shows today. Some people would like to have a colleague or a friend co-host the show with them. Well, there's a benefit to that. The benefit of that is that you don't have to do all the talking. You don't have to worry about creating all the airspace that needs to be filled. You can have someone add different contrast to what you say so that it can keep it entertaining to the people. Now, some of the challenges with that, challenges that you have to make sure that you're recording that thing if you're in different places so that everything can be in alignment with one another. You have to make sure that each of you is in alignment when it comes to sound, when it comes to timing and so forth. And when it comes to if you're making money, if you're splitting money, is it going to be a 50-50 split or not? You need to make sure all those things are discussed and in place before you get started. It's best to have it in writing. That's my advice. So what we're going to do right now, that was my pro tip for today on pros and cons. We're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, I got a great guest for you guys today, most entertaining guest. Now, you're saying, Barrett, you say that every week. Well, I can't help it if my friends are the bomb. So all I want you to do is just stay where you are, stick tight. We'll be right back right after this message with more of the Productive Podcast. How are you going to learn everything you need to know about starting a podcast? Well, at the Create Your Podcast Weekend, we put it all in 2 days and help you get your podcast going by next week. That's right, by next week. All you have to do is come to the Create Your Podcast Weekend and let us show you how to get your podcast up and running. We will show you how to attract listeners. We will show you how to get people to pay you for your products and services. What products and services? The products and services we show you how to create, all at the Create Your Podcast Weekend. All you have to do is go to createyourpodcastweekend.com and get registered today. And we have special bonuses. Some of you will even get us to give you the equipment to start your podcast. That's right. We're going to give some of you the podcasting equipment to get started. Go to createyourpodcastweekend.com. That's createyourpodcastweekend.com and get started on your podcast by next week. It's time to be a boss, a media boss. If you're in business for yourself, it's time that you get your message out. And podcasting is the best way to do it. Let us create a done-for-you podcast experience with Media Boss Club. All you have to do is go to MediaBossClub.com and we'll create a done-for-you podcast right now. That's MediaBossClub.com. All right, everybody, welcome back to the Productive Podcast. And once again, I'm Dr. Barrett Matthews. I want you guys to get ready. I got a great guest today. Let me ask you something. Do you want open and honest podcast conversations for adults? Well, get ready. Because, man, the MF'n podcast, you heard me right, will give you just that. Join me and my man, Mr. Headquarters. You heard that right, too. Because he's going to tell you what he brings with his podcast right now. So everybody help me. Welcome, Mr. Headquarters, to the Productive Podcast. Welcome to the show, my man.
Thank you, Dr. Barrett. Thank you for having me on. I appreciate it.
But man, I'm glad to have you here. So first, I got to ask you the name of your podcast. I know you get asked this that's the first question everybody asks you. I know that. So I got to ask you right now, how did you come up with that?
Wow. So it took a long process. If you really want to be honest, it wasn't as easy as you think. I mean, I know it's a simple phrase, it's adult themed, but a long time we went through like maybe about three different names. I think we went through the Garage Bros, the Cultured Crew. We went through a lot of different names, and we settled on this one because our opinionated views on a lot of things that we have, particularly myself. I am extremely opinionated about a lot of different things. So sometimes a lot of the guys on the show, my other co-hosts kind of call me the overly opinionated sometimes, but I think it kind of makes me who I am, you know? So I try not to change that at all. So myself, my co-host, Thick Eye Bandit, and you heard that right, Thick Eye Bandit, because he has probably the thickest glasses you probably have ever seen in your life.
Oh my God, that takes me back to those neighborhood days. We just give everybody nicknames.
Oh yeah, we took it back. We took it back home. You know what I'm saying? We all reside from New Orleans for the most part. So we wanted to keep it real, authentic, organic. We want to keep a loose environment, that way we can just have a good conversation, kind of like you're having in the barbershop. But except the difference is with us, we started out in a garage, and that's kind of how it started. So we started out in the garage in my friend's garage out in the east in New Orleans, and we just kind of spitball from there, and then we just created.
What kind of topics have you all discussed? What kind of type of things have you all discussed? I might not want to ask that question. But
so if you ever get a chance to listen, if any of your listeners get a chance to listen to the teaser episode, the teaser episode is what it is. It's a big tease, but it kind of really gets deep into our conversation about relationships. Okay. And we start off with men versus women. We pulling on the strings early.
We can never win that one.
Well, I did my best to try to.
Yeah, you can try all you want to. I told someone recently, I said, the sooner you realize they ain't control, the better your life gonna be, man.
You're right about that. but we tried our best to we tackled the conversation about who's in control. Who leads the household more? Is it truly the man? Is it the man is the king of the house, or is it the woman who really leads from behind the scene?
You could go a whole year on that one.
It took an interesting turn. I'll say that. And it was only 15 minutes, but it took an interesting turn real quick.
How do you keep that to 15 minutes, man?
Well, that's why it was a teaser episode.
Oh, okay. That's okay. Yeah.
But we touched on a few things. We touched on group economics, which is the basis of our show, which is why we came together. Us five. We started out with 5 people.
That's what I was going to ask you too. Okay, so
we started out with 5, but now we're at 4. Unfortunately, one of our brothers had to step away and take care of his personal needs. And, so we made sure we took care of him on that end. But we also touch on business. We touch on money. We touch on fatherhood. We touch on a different thing. We talk on mental health.
Wow.
So we touch on a variety of things, current events. So we make sure we try to stay current on things as much as we can. And try to stay grounded.
So how long have you been doing the podcast?
We started the podcast in May 2020, and we launched in August.
Okay. Oh, fantastic. So have you been able to monetize it?
We never monetized yet.
Okay. I asked that because a lot of people wonder, do they? I'm going to put it this way. I had someone contact me today, someone close to me. He said, "Hey, Barrett, I want to start a podcast and I want to make money with it." I'm like, dude, it ain't like that. You don't just start a podcast and start making money. I said, understand, this is not a fast process, man.
No, it is
I said,
not.
first, you don't even have an audience. So
nobody knows who you are.
Right. So it's one, and a lot of people think that. That's why I wanted to ask that, because if you did do it since August, that's fantastic. I mean, that's a fantastic thing. But and a lot of people understand this. These guys are out here doing their podcast right now because they have something to say. That's the main reason you need to do your podcast.
Yes.
That's the main reason. If you can monetize it once you build that up and once you establish your identity as who you are as a podcaster, then you can start working on ways to get money going on. Now, let me ask you this: what are some of the challenges you guys had in doing that?
Like when we first started?
Yeah.
Wow. So one of the first things that was the toughest thing that was really trying to define who we were as a podcast.
Okay.
I mean, we had a nice attention-grabbing name, but what is the show? Right. What exactly? When we first started off, it was kind of Shade Room-esque, and I didn't want to try to go there. You know, I didn't want to try to grab from the sleazy titles and all the gossiping and all that stuff. I wanted to actually have something that actually
some substance.
Brought some substance for our community too, because the other half of our show is we actually interview entrepreneurs in our community.
Oh, great!
And so we wanted to make sure that we had something actually backing up that end on the other half. So one half of the show is the four of us talking about whatever current events is going on or whatever we feel like is important in our lives. And then after that, the second half of the show is now that we're starting to really get into season 2 is we've been talking to people that think like us, had the same business mindset as us. For myself, I have a business background. I have a business degree. So I want to make sure that I want to really implement that, and I spent so much time and money in school. I said, you know what? I probably should be working in somewhat of the field that I actually know. Yeah. And I think the biggest thing too was speaking about things that you actually know about too.
That's big. That's big.
I think we got into the realm of sometimes of recording some things that we didn't really were comfortable talking about, or at least had enough knowledge about. Yeah. And I think that was one thing that we really made sure that we tackled. And then I think we kind of getting a grasp on who we really are now in season 2.
That's good. Now, how long are your seasons?
First season was about 15 episodes with a couple of bonus episodes in there.
Okay. And how often do you do your podcast?
Once a week. We drop. Okay. We tried to be consistent, but life is.
Yeah, brother, I feel you.
It's tough for podcasts.
I feel you on that. And the thing is, because I just started this podcast a little while ago. This is probably one of my 30th, 32nd, 33rd episode. And I'm still in the first season. So I'm trying to figure out how long I want to go before I think I might do 50.
Okay.
Before I take a break. Yeah, before I take a break. And here's the reason why. Because someone asked me to start another podcast too. Yeah. So
to start with someone else or with yourself?
No, well, with myself, I'll be interviewing people. But this one I'll be interviewing like world leaders.
Okay. That sounds interesting.
I'm people like kings from Africa and governors and stuff. So
really,
I couldn't pass that up. So yeah.
That sounds great.
Yeah. So
that sounds
I couldn't pass
good.
it up. So that means I can't do both at the same time. Take on. So I just yeah.
I'll tell you what.
If you can't talk about the work that goes into putting together the podcast, because there are people listening right now that want to do a podcast, they don't know should they do everything by themselves, what goes into it, and all that stuff.
Well, I think it depends on what you're doing too. I would say make sure you understand how many people you have. In my opinion, 3 or less is the best route to go. I
Okay.
think 2 to 3 is good
You're
because
talking about co-hosts?
co-host, right?
Okay.
And the reason I say that is in having one person is like talking to yourself.
Hmm.
If you comfortable talking with yourself, then you'll have a great show.
Yeah.
So if you're having 2, 3, 4 people, even 5, now you kind of get into the what everybody's comfortable with talking about. Are you going to be able to provide any substance if you talk in this realm or in this realm or in that realm? So that was some of the things that we had to make sure that we make sure that everybody was comfortable with the topics that we were talking about. So it's
Yeah.
some of the things that we were talking about was politics too. We touch in there here and there, but we try not to dip in there too much
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
the political scene can be kind of messy.
Touchy. Yeah.
Yeah. But I like the way we're going right now. I mean, everything's been going pretty good. Season 1 was a little rocky, I think, because we're kind of fumbling around in the
You're
dark,
learning.
so to speak. Yeah.
Yeah, you're learning a lot. You're learning the podcast, you're learning who you are, you're learning each other, the chemistry.
Yes.
That's a whole lot, man. You're talking about 4 and 5 people. Woo. Well, see, here's the thing. There's one young lady who I helped produce with her podcast.
Okay.
And her model was a little different. And I like your model much better because hers was, she has some friends that she talks to. And she said, hey, come on and be on my podcast. And we'll just shoot the breeze about a different topic all the time. But the thing was, she was the only one committed.
Mm.
See, you guys are all committed to it. It's a group podcast. This was her podcast, but they were joining in, helping her out, and so they weren't committed. So it was one of those things. It was hard. That's hard to do because only one person's committed to it, and you have a group.
Yeah, if one person or 2 people, or if not everybody involved is committed, you're gonna have a really tough time.
Yeah.
You got to have everybody on the same page. It's like having a team. Just like in sports, or if you're working in a work environment, you got to have a team that's all in one sync, one goal in mind, one mission. So having everybody in sync on that level will really make things very easy on your mindset. Trust me.
And you've been able to interview some cool people, right?
Yes. We had a chance to interview Ashley Marissa from Bravo TV. Bravo TV's from To Rome with Love.
Mm-hmm.
We've also interviewed Bomani X from Clubhouse.
Ooh.
We have a few more surprise guests that's going to be coming up throughout the season 2. Oh yeah. So we have a few more coming down the pipeline. So
love it, man.
Season 2 and season 3 is going to be nice.
I love it. So are you? I know you said you're down to 4 people on your podcast. Are you looking to bring another a 5th person, or are you going to stay at 4?
No, we're gonna definitely stay at. We're comfortable staying at 4 now.
No.
Trust me. Well, I mean, let me clean that up. The only reason why.
No need, man. No.
Well, I just want to give us a little context. It's because I think some people might go through the same thing, because I've actually got that question a lot.
Right.
And I think it's important, like I said before, it's important to know what you're talking about, but it's also important to know what direction you want to go into.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you don't know what you're talking about, or the direction, or what is your even general audience,
right?
You need to, that's important. Having those topics and those who your audience is before you get started.
That's a good
at least
point.
in mind.
That's a good point. Now, let me ask you, in that vein, how do you all come up with your discussion topics? Is it like one person that does that part of it and all of you join in, or do you all have a meeting to discuss different topics? How does that happen?
Right. So we try to have a weekly Zoom call with all the guys, because everybody lives in different locations.
Mm-hmm.
So we try to have a weekly Zoom call, whether it's a Friday night, Thursday night, whenever everybody's available. Life gets crazy, so we don't pinpoint it on one particular day. The only thing that's constant is the day that we record.
Gotcha.
We try to stay consistent on that. So we always record Saturday nights. We always make sure, hey, Saturday night, we getting the guys together, we getting these topics together. Normally it's myself and Thick Eye Bandit. We get those topics together and we kind of brainstorm from there.
I love that name, Thick Eye Bandit. I love I mean, I'm telling you, man, it makes me think of some of the nicknames in my neighborhood, man, I swear. And the people wonder where did those names come from, but only the people in the neighborhood will understand. So
yes, you're right. And sometimes those names come down upon you, not because you wanted them.
oh yeah, I mean,
they come because that's something that everybody was comfortable calling you.
I got a friend when I grew up with him. He had a large head. We called him. But here's the thing: we called him Joe Rockhead. And when we grew older, it got cool because we started calling this for short, called him Joe Rock. So now it's a cool name. Because it's Joe Rock. It's a cool, but it started out because of his head. We called him Joe Rockhead.
But see, he got comfortable because he knew y'all, and he got comfortable with that name just fitting in. And now you kind of just shorten it to a cooler version of that.
Exactly. So it's just funny that when you mentioned the Thick Guy Band, I'm gonna have to tell somebody about that. That's a cool name. But so before I let you go, man, I want you to tell everybody the name of your podcast again and where they can find you, man.
Right. So it's the MF'n podcast. We're on 20 different platforms, so it's not hard to find us. We're on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify. We're on Audible, Pandora, iHeartRadio, Podbean, wherever you want to look for podcasts, we are on it. We're also on the Black Podcast app, which is available on iOS and Google Play Store. So you can also catch us on that platform as well. We're also on IG, which you can catch us at the MFN Pod. We're on Twitter at the MFN Podcast 1. Just hit us up on there, or you can even drop us a line. We have a phone line that if you want to drop us a text message or a voicemail, we'll even play it back on the show if it's interesting enough, or not perverted because we get a few weird calls sometimes. But it's 504-499-1059.
I love it. Look, guys, this is Mr. Headquarters here of the MF'n Podcast. What I want you guys to do is make sure you support his podcast. He told you it's everywhere. You can't miss it. It's everywhere. I want you guys to support
Google us.
that. But guess what? He's not going anywhere. He's going to stick with us because we're going to be right back with a next segment called PodQuest. He'll be right back right after this message. Why should you contact Media Boss Club right now? Well, because you can get a podcast done for you. You can learn all the aspects that go into putting together a great podcast and have someone else do it for you. That's right. We will build your podcast around your content and make it so you can concentrate on the money-making activities of your business. Contact MediaBossClub.com. That's MediaBossClub.com today and let us get your podcast started right now. Starting a podcast can be a daunting task. There's a lot that goes into it, and you're probably wondering if you're able to handle it. Well, why don't you just take 2 days and let us teach you how to do it at the Create Your Podcast Weekend. That's right. We're going to show you all the aspects of how to start your podcast, how to keep your podcast going, how to attract listeners, and how to make money with your podcast. CreateYourPodcastWeekend.com. Get registered right now. Let's face it, you've been talking about starting a podcast for quite some time, but you haven't started yet. Why is that? Could it be that you just don't have the time because your day-to-day keeps you so busy? Or could it be that you don't want to learn all the technical aspects that go into putting together a quality podcast? Well, at Media Boss Club, we take care of that for you. How would you like to have a done-for-you experience? That's right. At Media Boss Club, we build your podcast for you. We will edit your podcast. We will put in the music for you. We even put in commercial breaks that you can put your advertisers in. We will take care of all of the uploading to the great podcast platforms that are out there. That's right, we do everything. All you have to do is just right now go to MediaBossClub.com. That's MediaBossClub.com and let us handle the heavy lifting for you. Hey everybody. Look, did I disappoint or what? I told you, man, Mr. Headquarters was the bomb. He brought it with the MF'n podcast. I want you guys to make sure you pay attention to that. But guess what? I told you he wasn't going anywhere. So he is still here. He is still here. And we are going to do PodQuest right now.
PodQuest.
Now, PodQuest is where we take one of the questions from our audience members and we answer. Now, I know what y'all about to say. I want to get my question. How come you can't read my question on it? Well, I'm going to tell you how you can do that. All you have to do is go to our Facebook group, which is The Productive Podcaster, and make sure that you join. And I want you to engage. I don't want you to just put a question there. I want you to engage with us. Let us know who you are, what you're about, what you're doing. No, now, when I say that, don't go posting your podcast link in there. No, we ain't here to promote the podcast. We're here to engage, get to know one another, build a community. That's what we're doing. But ask your question and we may get an answer. So, Mr. Headquarters, the question today is, how many episodes do I need to do before I take a break?
Wow. Yeah, that's a great question, because I think if you go too long, you can burn yourself out. So what we did, and this was my creation that I did with the show for seasons. I decided to do seasons instead of having a full length of amount of shows. So, which is fine. You can do that if you have a nice team behind you. Because I think a lot of times people look at these bigger podcasts, but they don't see behind the scenes that a lot of these podcasts have a big, massive amount of teams behind them. So if you're starting out just yourself or a buddy or two or three, I would suggest this. Make sure that you set a standard and say, hey, you know what? I'm going to set out just maybe 8 to 10 shows, maybe even 15, just to start off with a season. And that will give you a good chance to sit and watch and kind of sit back and be able to assess everything that you did from that season. Take a break, take a load off, actually let your mind reset. And you might even get some better ideas too because of that. Yeah. And trust me, it's going to take a load off, because starting a podcast, you're going to have a whole lot of hats to wear. So trust me, take that break.
Yeah, that's true. He's right about that. I agree 100%. And another thing I would say to you is, if you're talking about taking a break, you'll know when you want to take a break.
Oh, yeah.
You'll know. So regardless of what the count is of how many episodes you've done, you'll know when you want to take a break. Mm-hmm. And guess what? If you know when you want to take a break, your audience will know it too.
Yes.
Because your product will not be the same. They can feel it, and they will let you know.
Yes. Yes,
they will let you know. So if that is the case, take a break. There's nothing wrong with that. Take a break and build new content. And see, what it also allows you to do is to go back over the other content and see what things you may need to work on to improve.
Yes.
What things you may want to take out, what things you may want to add to your podcast. Because don't understand this. There's nothing wrong with tweaking it. There's nothing wrong with changing things. It's your show.
Absolutely.
It's your show. So if you feel that you need to take a break and do those things, take a break and do it. I would say, don't take it too long.
Yes. I would like to say, when you do a podcast, if you go past 30 days without uploading anything into the podcast data directory, they will label you as a inactive podcast. So make sure you have something, just a snippet, a clip or a teaser, something in that little break, just to say, have something preloaded and say, hey,
even like a promotional thing. Yeah,
exactly. Absolutely.
Do something because you want to keep that audience enticed as well. So you want to keep them interested in you. When you come back, you want to, they want to see. Here's the thing. You don't have like Game of Thrones or nothing like that. So where they can't wait for you, so you have to keep them interested.
Yes.
So you got to keep them interested, because they ain't sitting there just saying, oh my God, when are they going to come back with their podcast? Nah, they ain't
not starting out. No.
People moving on. So and they will find another podcast to listen to. So I understand that as well. So I want to thank Mr. Headquarters once again for joining us. Tell us, please, before we let you go, where they can find your podcast, the name of your podcast, and where they can find it as well.
Yes, appreciate that again, Doc. It's the MF'n Pod, or the MF'n Podcast. You can Google us by Googling one word, the MF'n Pod, or you can check us out on the 20 different platforms that we're on, which such as Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Pandora, Audible, Amazon Music. The list goes on. the Black Podcast app, which is available on iOS and Google Play Store. You can also check us out on IG, which is our IG handle is the MF'n Pod. You can check us out on Twitter at the MF'n Podcast 1.
I love it. I love it. He's got it covered. I got to talk to him about some of those things too. I need to get mine up on some of those. So we're going to talk.
Yeah, let's do it.
But yeah, most definitely. So thank you once again for joining us, guys. And before he goes, I want to tell everybody before you start seeing me and him, make sure you go and show him some love. Make sure you support the podcast. This is not a competition, guys. We're in this together, guys. So make sure you support him. Make sure you show him some love. Support his podcast. Subscribe. Look, I'm sure he got some of that nice merchandise for y'all as well. So make sure you ask him about that as well. So, Mr. Headquarters, thank you once again. You know I'm gonna have you back sometime as well, man. I appreciate you, brother.
I appreciate the opportunity. Thank you again.
No problem, no problem. Guess what, guys? It is time now for the podcast profile. This is where I find a podcast that I have listened to, and I think you guys may like it as well. Just take a listen to it. The one I listened to is called Handle with Care. It's a podcast by a lady named Carrie Madrid. I'm going to have Carrie on the podcast with that. Carrie Madrid, Handle with Care. And it talks to people who have been survivors of breast cancer, man. Look, man, cancer does not discriminate, man. So I'm just letting you know that I've had people affected. I think all of us have had someone who's affected by cancer. So it's a great podcast, Handle with Care. Listen to Carrie Madrid. You might enjoy it. Now it's time for our podcast giveaway. That's right, our podcast giveaway. Some of you are wondering right now, well, Barrett, how can I get a giveaway? I want to get something too. Look, I'm telling y'all, go to our Facebook group, The Productive Podcaster. Make sure that you join the group. Make sure you engage, and we may call your name to get the giveaway. Well, guess what? The person tonight who's getting the giveaway is a gentleman by the name of Greg Lewis. Greg, we thank you for paying attention to The Productive Podcaster. Greg, for his podcast, we are giving him a recording in progress sign to put on his door. This is not paper. This is not paper. This is sturdy, so it'll stay on his door, and people can't bug him while he is doing his podcast. Now, one other thing I want to tell you guys, if you want to get some giveaways, go on and support the Productive Podcaster on Patreon. We definitely would love to have you there. We'd love to have your support. So before we end the Productive Podcast today, I love to end the show with a quote, a productivity quote. I love doing that, a productivity quote. So today's productivity quote, I've been doing a lot of quotes by this person named Sunday Adelaja. Now, this one says, your daily product determines your output. Your daily product determines your output. So basically, it says, a lot of people think it's the other way around. Your output determines your product. Now, your product determines your output. So understand that. What is your product? What is your product? First, you need to determine that and figure that out. Then you'll know what type of output needs to be put into it. So that is our show for today. I want to thank my guest, Mr. Headquarters with the MF'n Podcast. I want you guys to support that. I want you guys right now to make sure you are subscribing to the Productive Podcast, to share with everyone. Let them know you're paying attention. Join us on Patreon. Make sure you support the show as well. And as I say before I always leave, I want to say this to you. Don't just settle for being awesome. Set your job to awe them all. And take action, everybody. We'll see you next time on the Productive Podcaster. Thank you for joining us on the Productive Podcaster. Be sure to join us next time for another great show. We welcome your engagement, so make sure you participate by joining the Productive Podcaster Facebook group and chime in. Also, share the Productive Podcaster with some of your friends right now. If you have a podcast and you're looking for guests, or if you would like to be a guest on a podcast, join our podcast exchange at www.podcastworlddirectory.com. We'll see you next time.